I would have liked this book as a teen. Even though sometimes it feels like a knockoff, it hits those same exciting storytelling joys you may have experienced reading The Hunger Games or The Giver. The drama and risk of living in a post-apocalyptic city and rebelling from an evil government is a story that's been told many times because it is a good story. Today's book is Reverence by Reana Rood. It was published in 2022. Sadly, the rest of this review is going to be critical. And it's not because the author brought Christianity into the story. That's why I picked it out. It is because of conservative politics. A couple content notes before we get into it. There will be discussion of death, execution, suicide, videos of ICE violence, and Tucker Carlson. The plot. After a deadly pandemic destroyed the world a decade ago, 19-year-old Kira lives in the city, surrounded by walls and cut off from everyone else. Resources are scarce, so every week people volunteer to die for the good of all. The brave volunteers are reverenced and given luxuries for their final week. Kira works as a helper to the volunteers, and this week's volunteer wants to spend his final days with her. Because of him, Kira finds out what's going on beyond the wall, and she questions everything she was taught. Again, parts of the story are good, and the writing is mostly good. This could have been an idea with a lot of potential. I enjoy books that make connections to real-world events. Especially in sci-fi or dystopia, it makes the story feel more real, and it gives the readers a chance to think through and process things they've lived through themselves or read about in history books. Unfortunately, reading this involves getting smacked by conservative red flags every couple of pages, even though I'm a little confused about it sometimes. On the very first page, we find out that the city of Nova Vita has some kind of healthcare for all. But is that healthcare to help the citizens? No. It's to find out which people have health problems and need to be scheduled for execution. They call these people compulsories. If you happen to remember politics in 2010, when the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, Vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin claimed there would be death panels to decide which citizens were worthy of health care and which would be left to die.
As more Americans delve into the disturbing details of the nationalized health care plan, our collective jaw is dropping. And we're saying not just no, but hell no.
She exploited fear with a new phrase that went viral: death panels.
The America I know and love is not one in which my parents or my baby with Down syndrome will have to stand in front of Obama's death panel.
Of course, there are death panels in there, but the important thing to remember is that's just one aspect of this atrocious, unaffordable, cumbersome, burdensome, evil policy of Obama's, and that is Obamacare.
Of course, this was not in any kind of proposed legislation, and it was simply a way to make her liberal opponents look bad. But in Nova Vita, death panels are a reality. Or maybe it's just a death checkbox, like if you are sick at all, check, time to go. Our heroine, Kira, watches as her mother is gently executed by a medical dose at a clinic, so the city doesn't have to pay for her cancer treatment. The book does a really good job of highlighting this underlying conservative belief about scarcity. If you understand that they don't believe there's enough to go around, other beliefs make sense. Immigrants are bad because there isn't enough to go around. They'll take your stuff. Healthcare for all is bad because there isn't enough to go around. Someone else will get your medicine or your time with a doctor.
In the law, that there will be rationing of healthcare.
I don't think that's true. I'm just trying to understand. The reason for fears about scarcity in this story also come from a real-world situation. These people have lived through a pandemic. Remember, this was published in 2022, so it was very fresh to the author. Their virus was much more deadly than ours. It sounds like everyone infected died within a few days. That's horrific, but from a scientific point of view, it actually would have made the virus harder to spread. Part of the problem with COVID was that you could get infected and be asymptomatic for a week or two, or just have a mild case. That gave a lot more opportunity to spread the disease and time for it to morph into new variants. COVID is sneaky. The town of Nova Vita shut down, like a medieval city closing their gates against smallpox. And then they never reopened, and it's been 10 years. No one in the city talks about internet or radio or sees planes flying overhead. It's like they're the only city left on Earth. I'm sure that's not true, and we probably find out in the sequels. Comment below if you've read the sequels and want to spoil them for me, because I'm not going to keep reading them. The pandemic is used as an excuse to never let outsiders in the city, even though the pandemic must have burned out years ago. But the mayor says the people living outside the city are lawless, and they just want to use up the city's limited resources. When America was in deep COVID in the real world, conservatives were very worried about shutting things down and excessive government control. So this story lives out this fear. I thought it meant that the government of Nova Vita would be really liberal and act out different parodies of what the author thought Democrats believe. That doesn't really happen in this book. But if you do want to read about cartoon Democrats written by conservatives, check out my other book review about right-wing post-apocalyptic fiction in the book California. I wonder, with this kind of pandemic, it probably did make sense to close the gates. That seems to work in zombie movies. The strange part is that they kept the city closed for so long, and there's no plan to reopen, ever. And every citizen seems content with that. It is a bold storytelling move to have most of the population of the city remember clearly when the world was normal. I feel skeptical that human nature would change so drastically in a decade. Okay, next real world example. I may be wrong about this one, but there is a blip of a story about a tower falling, and the outsiders are blamed, but our heroes are pretty sure the government did it. It sounds like a 9/11 thing, right? It wasn't a business office. It was housing for the poor. Conspiracy theories around 9/11 weren't super popular, but they are a part of a long history of distrust and anger that later led to QAnon and stolen election lies. I wish this part of the story was more developed so I could get more of a grasp on the author's intentions here. As it was, it seemed like another example of how the government doesn't value human life at all, and they control people by fear. But if there is a real population crisis, and you don't have moral qualms about murder, why not do this weekly? I want to compare this more to other dystopias. In Nova Vita, there are no old people. At age 60, everyone becomes a compulsory. This naturally made me think of The Giver. It had been decades since I'd read it, but certain lines stuck in my brain. I read it again for this review. The Giver's town has a name for their execution practice: release. Most citizens don't realize release means death. When young Jonas finds out, he is horrified. Jonas stared at him. Release is always like that? For people who break the rules 3 times? For the old? Do they kill the old too? Yes, it's true. What about Fiona? She loves the old. She's in training to care for them. Does she know yet? What will she do when she finds out? How will she feel? Jonas brushed wetness from his face with the back of one hand. Fiona is already being trained in the fine art of release, the Giver told him. She's very efficient at her work, your red-haired friend. Feelings are not part of the life she's learned. What I'd forgotten about this story was about releasing babies. It's very upsetting. Maybe I blanked it out the first time, I don't know. That impacted the end of the story. When Jonas escapes the community, he brings along his baby brother because he's scheduled for release. Kira also rescues a child scheduled for death at the climax of this story. It was the best part of the book. I liked Kira in these scenes. Still, the book didn't provoke emotions like The Giver, which made me cry as I reread it. While researching for this video, I read an article saying that all dystopian stories are actually conservative, and it mentioned The Giver in the Hunger Games specifically. I was surprised, but I did my reread thinking about this. There's a little bit of liberal utopia in The Giver. Everyone has enough food to eat, a home to live in, and a job or way of contributing. Yet, part of how they do this is by eliminating diversity and embracing sameness. The Giver was written in 1993, the same time I was a young kid in school, and I was being taught colorblindness. This meant that we were supposed to not notice, to not see that people were different races or different colors. It made sense at the time. No races meant no racism, right? But it didn't actually work. It was a pretty good way to ignore if someone else was being treated poorly due to race. It didn't work on systemic issues at all, because we were supposed to ignore if there was still school segregation going on, or if funding was unfair, or that more Black people were being put into prison. Colorblindness also meant that white culture was normal. People dressing different, eating different, acting different, speaking different, whatever it was, it didn't fit the colorblind mold. There was an unspoken expectation. For me to treat you like an equal, you need to act normal. I admit I do miss the part of the 90s where it was socially unacceptable to be a Nazi. But give me a minute before we come back to that. I kept noticing when characters in this book had compassion or not. Even Kira was a strange mix of compassion and disdain for her fellow humans. Although Kira was much nicer than Katie in my other post-apocalyptic review. On page 1, 17-year-old Kira is in the compulsory room, waiting with her mom. Everyone else is there for the same reason. But Kira is unable to generate a tear for anyone but her mother. She refuses to look at a crying infant or think about their suffering. As they walk down the hallway, Mom tells her look away from the teen who's waiting for their injection. But also, Kira is angry when the receptionist doesn't look at her and thinks that she's a coward. Using the word look over and over makes me think something meaningful is happening here. Is Kira going to learn to look at others in a new way? I thought there was going to be some character growth. Maybe the author intended that, but it certainly doesn't work out like I expected. We do see that Kira recognizes what the city is doing is wrong. I mean, she knew that on page 1 because it was wrong to kill her mom. But she also gets a job working for the city, so it's a mixed message. The story moves on to age 19 pretty quickly, where she is working and she attends the weekly Reverence ceremony. She thinks she is the only person feeling sad when the crowd applauds the new week's batch of volunteers who will soon be executed. And then people applaud the upcoming death of a 5-year-old child. Kira surveyed the faces of the people seated nearby. A few looked surprised, but none reflected the horror she felt inside. The vast majority were smiling, tears glistening in their eyes, as if a little boy volunteering to be murdered by his own city was the most magnificent thing they'd ever seen. And then the crowd applauded. It's like Kira is patting herself on the back for being the one human in a crowd of monsters. I would be having completely different thoughts. I would be wondering, does everyone around me think they have to fake it? Or I'd be wondering, is this the moment to spark a revolution? Surely everyone would be on my side if they had just a little bit of hope. This is done really well in the Hunger Games. And of course, that must have inspired this to some extent. But let's watch in the movie how much better this was done before. Katniss is also a volunteer. She goes to her death to save the life of her little sister.
Prim! I volunteer! I volunteer as tribute!
No one else volunteers in this community, and no one applauds a volunteer.
Let's have a big hand for our very first volunteer, Katniss Everdeen.
They take it very seriously. I don't know why the people of Nova Vita are inhuman. It makes it easier for us readers to dislike them. And maybe that helps us dislike our fellow humans. Will, Kira's love interest, also has a strange relationship with compassion. He brings a lot of righteous anger into the story because he is an outsider. He sneaks in and out of town, and he has a very good reason for his anger, because he watched city patrols execute his parents for no reason when he was a child. I understand when he is angry with the mayor and others in charge, but he also loathes the average citizen of Nova Vita. Will mocks the volunteers. They're perfectly happy dying as long as they get their week of luxuries first. This uncharitable thought simply isn't true, and Kira knows it well, but she doesn't argue with him. Her job is taking care of the volunteers. She had once explained to her friend Emma, most volunteers aren't crazy, you know. They want sensible things, things that help their families, survivor benefits for their spouse, better jobs within the city for their kids, stuff like that. Her volunteer from last week was a 57-year-old woman who found a lump in her breast. So she figured she might as well be a volunteer rather than becoming a compulsory, like Kira's mom. I should talk more about Will, but I don't want to. Despite the fact that he's the one who makes the plot happen, he is a frustrating character. Will is the one who wakes Kira up. He meets her by pretending to be a volunteer, asking to spend his last week with her, showing her the reality of the unregulated zone. It's all part of his master plan. A plan that doesn't work and doesn't make sense. He knows that she is the mayor's illegitimate daughter. So he thinks he can kidnap her to pressure Mayor Dad into admitting that the military patrols in the unregulated zone were murdering unarmed civilians, and then to stop all the patrol activity. He's asking this of the man who executes his own citizens constantly. Will is not smart. His plans are bad. He makes empty threats, and he never follows through. Will gets another chance to threaten Mayor Dad right before the climax. The three of them are in a room alone, so he bars the door and he waves a gun at the mayor. The mayor is bored with this empty threat, and frankly, the reader is bored too. Again, Will wants a public confession, but it's not going to happen. I don't want to get hung up on the plot of this book. I'm more interested in what it says about people and what it says about our world. Will is one of the good guys, but he is ineffective at making change in the world. Part of that is because he doesn't see a larger picture. He only cares about helping his group of people. He doesn't see that everyone in the city is also suffering. I don't understand if Kira is also a misanthrope, or if Will teaches her not to care about the people in the city. Kira does save the little boy in the climax, and she does a good job. I just wish that having compassion for this child didn't mean a total lack of empathy for anyone else. The narrative tells us Kira didn't like many people in Nova Vita, but she liked Teddy Easton. Kira actually only likes one other person, her best friend Emma. But when Emma gets drunk on their double date, she tells Kira off for not liking her terrible date and calls her a snob. Kira reflects on it later and decides that alcohol reveals her friend's true feelings. It's a real bummer that's her only friend. Emma mostly redeems herself in the climax. She helps Kira carry out her plan to rescue Will and Teddy. But then Emma refuses to leave the city with Kira. I think this means that Emma is going to be arrested. If you've read the rest of the series, please let me know what happens to Emma in the comments. I'm worried about her. And of course, it's not just Emma. Even though the climax was good, it stands out to me that Kira only rescued the two people she cared about. Kira and Emma could have destroyed the whole compulsory clinic, or at least destroyed the supply of all the execution medicine. At the beginning of the book, Kira couldn't spare a thought for anyone else in the clinic other than her own mom. At the end of the book, her boyfriend is the only person in the clinic that she cares about. We never see the city being moved closer to revolt. I wonder if they even notice when Kira is gone. Part of what's confusing about this book is that both the hero and the villain are conservatives. Kira's dad, the evil mayor of Nova Vita, is the main villain. She is his illegitimate daughter, and most people don't know about her. Mayor Dad runs the whole system. On one side, the compulsory executions for people with any illness or disability, or over the age of 60. And on the other side, voluntary executions for people who are paid in fame and benefits for their families. The city claims that without this constant sacrifice, they will run out of food in 5 years. I have no idea if that's true or if it's just a way to be an evil controlling government. The narrative is inconsistent about whether or not there's enough food. There's a scene where Will says that bread is cheap, and then minutes later, Kira says flour is a luxury. Mayor Dad tells Kira about a time years ago when do-gooders wanted to help people outside the city. Word got out, as it does, that the patrols had located camps of survivors in the unregulated zone. You were too young to remember this, but a small faction of do-gooders in the city started riling everybody up, saying we needed to send food and supplies with the patrols to help the people in the unregulated zone. The mayor rolled his eyes and shook his head in disgust. It was total lunacy. They acted as if we had an unlimited supply of resources to go around. You might as well call them bleeding hearts, right? Again with the scarcity theme, but also the underlying conservative belief is this: it's us versus them. Mayor Dad pits the citizens of his town against the people outside in the unregulated zone. He makes up lies about how those people are lawless and sick and terrifying. It sounds exactly how conservatives talk about illegal immigrants.
It is now clear that for many of our elected leaders, it's not even worth having a country if that country comes with real borders. The federal government, you may have heard, is on the brink of shutting down tomorrow if Congress can't come to an agreement on funding it. The main stumbling block remains DACA. That's, of course, President Obama's program that gives work permits to illegal immigrants who came here as minors. Almost all Democrats and many Republicans are pushing for an amnesty for DACA recipients, as well as for millions of other illegal immigrants. For Democrats, it's understandable because the calculus is simple. Having abandoned the concerns of the middle class here, they need millions of new voters, and they need them fast. Otherwise, their party risks becoming a permanent minority. Replacing ungrateful citizens with obedient immigrants is their only hope. Every Democrat who's thought it through for even a minute knows this well. But until recently, there really were few reliable numbers on crimes committed by illegal immigrants. And this allowed Democrats to pretend that every person who sneaks across our border goes on to become a heart surgeon or a member of SEAL Team 6.
Notice how Tucker imagines what his enemies are thinking. He cannot imagine caring about undocumented immigrants himself. Therefore, his enemies also can't possibly care about immigrants. The only reason he would care is if he thought he could get more votes for his political party. Therefore, that must be what the other side is doing, right? Or he's just a liar. You can tell that's an old clip because he was still on Fox News. He was fired for lying, but his lies only mattered when they actually cost the company money. As long as his lies made money, Fox was very happy with him.
when he explained the rationale for his views on immigration. Diversity is our strength. Now, you've heard that phrase before, obviously. You hear it every day. In effect, it's our new national motto, soon to replace the outdated and, in fact, polar opposite sentiment, e pluribus unum. The less we have in common, the stronger we are? Is a marriage stronger when spouses have radically different beliefs? Are you closer to your kids when you share no common points of reference? Do you speak the same language as your best friend? Could you be best friends if you didn't? These are important questions, given that our leaders are radically and permanently changing our country wholly on the basis of their faith that diversity is, in fact, our strength. In other words, diversity isn't our strength. Unity is our strength. Don't the left lie to you. That doesn't mean we have to look alike. Doesn't mean we have to come from the same places. It does mean we have to share common beliefs. Otherwise, we'll hate each other, and the whole enterprise will fall apart.
I'm sorry to put so much Tucker Carlson in this video, really. Tucker is one of those people it is impossible to have a conversation with because he rewrites the meaning of words. For a liberal word, like diversity, he invents the most extreme meaning, people having nothing in common and no values. But the word that he wants us to use, unity, gets to mean having common ground and values, but also coming from different backgrounds and looking different. So his definition of unity includes diversity. In this case, he knows he's talking nonsense, and he has to work really hard to justify cruelty. And it's worked. 8 years later, he got what he wanted. Unfortunately, this is when I'm going to share the ice clips. I'm going to turn the volume way down to see if that makes it a little better. I don't hunt out this content myself. I've just copied these from the Tim and April show, and I will put a link to that in the comments, and you can see their excellent commentary. I'd like to think the author of this book doesn't support any of this cruelty, right? I'm not making any personal accusations here. I'm just drawing connections about where I feel like these beliefs go. In this story, Kira finds out that the outside people are kind, working hard to support each other and to carry on their religious faith. This inflames her dislike of everyone living in the city. So Kira is still us versus them, but she's just flipped sides. Kira rubbed at the goosebumps on her arms, but it was no use. They wouldn't go away. She didn't want to believe Will's story because it went against everything she believed. The people living in the unregulated zone were the brutal ones, the dangerous ones. And there's a key problem to this mentality. If you assume that your enemies hate you as much as you hate them, that's just another reason to hate them more. And it makes all the problems worse. And to be fair, I'm not trying to say there aren't bad guys in the world. I don't like that phrasing. My 5-year-old is obsessed with bad guys and good guys. But I'm not, because I'm an adult. There are rich who prey on the poor, strong who prey on the weak, oppressors just being oppressive. Christians believe in a sin nature. There's something in people that inspires us to make bad choices. Maybe it's selfishness. Maybe it's apathy. A good story explores what happened, either in someone's personal life or in a system as a whole to lead to these bad actions. But if you divide people into bad guys versus good guys, or us versus them, the reasons don't matter. Bad people do bad things because they are bad people. That's not reality because life is complicated. Even the examples I gave before could be flipped around. Sometimes oppressed people do bad things. out of fear, or maybe in an attempt to gain a tiny bit of social status. Sometimes rich people do bad things out of ignorance. Or sometimes rich and powerful people see the light and try to use their privilege for something good. In The Hunger Games, as the reader meets the people in the Capitol, we find out they aren't all evil. Some of them have realized that the world is wrong, and they try to help. Some even die for the cause.
Ten seconds to launch.
This character, Cinna, used his artistic skills to support the cause, even though he must have known it may mean sacrificing his life. Speaking of people who give up their life for others, I almost forgot to talk about Jesus in this review. The kind outsider community has a church and a pastor. They pray and read the Bible. Kira's mom was also a secret Christian, which gave her solace while facing death. Kira later found her mom's Bible study books hidden in a closet. I'm not sure why she kept that secret from her daughter, especially before the pandemic. Kira was like 7 when this all went down. Otherwise, there isn't much to say about faith in Reverence. If you took Jesus out of the story, would it change anything? The political themes in this book are more important than the religious ones. Jesus shows up in conservative fiction like a stamp of approval, not for redemption. I'm still thinking about the article that called dystopian stories conservative. That author said that teenagers always had to fight back against the government. The author must have thought conservatives like small government and liberals like big government, so opposing the government is inherently conservative and obeying the government is inherently liberal. Yeah, that isn't true at all. Here's the difference I see. Liberals tend to like governments providing services to those in need, and conservatives tend to like governments enforcing so-called law and order. Neither side is inherently against the concept of government. I think that article also fails on the theme of scarcity. In The Hunger Games, citizens in District 12 aren't starving because there isn't enough food to go around. It's because the Capitol wants them to be starving. People have more food than they can eat in the Capitol. The imbalance of resources is on purpose. Maybe Katniss felt like it was us versus them at the beginning of her story, but she meets people from all districts and the Capitol who want to work together for the good of all. The Hunger Games themselves are designed to pit the districts against each other, to redirect their frustrations and anger away from the Capitol. It's like in American history. Rich white people taught poor white people to hate Black people because they were afraid those two groups might work together and overthrow the rich. Still today, the rich tell poor Americans to hate immigrants and blame them for their scarcity. Even though the rich people in charge are stealing their wages, buying all the land, driving prices up. And we see a little bit of that in Reverence. The town has both rich and poor, and the rules about compulsories don't apply to the rich. I suspect there isn't a true lack of resources, and the whole thing is just a power grab for those in control. Have you been waiting for a Bible verse this whole time? Don't worry, I've got you. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fatted your hearts in a day of slaughter. From James chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. This is the kind of Bible verses the Outsiders Church should have been quoting. And of course, verses like this are warnings. There's still time to recognize sin and change. I don't read these verses as only being based in punishment. When we call out people who live in an us versus them world, there's also an invitation to stop living that way. Adding Jesus to a story should mean adding redemption to the story. So I'm going to close with a perspective of real wisdom from Nelson Mandela, who helped free South Africa from apartheid and who spent years in prison. I knew as well as I knew anything that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Mandela understood redemption, and he practiced it even to those who considered themselves his enemies, those who imprisoned him and did all kinds of terrible things. I want to figure out how to write that kind of story and to live that kind of life. I've been really hard on this book today. I don't actually think it's the worst or anything. I am collecting data as I review Christian fiction, especially in these post-apocalyptic stories. I'm trying to figure out where things went wrong in this genre. And I don't know, maybe even in Christianity, and like, why do we have this unholy alliance with the Republican Party in America? My lesson from this book is that conservative dystopia fails because of a lack of compassion and a lack of understanding of human nature. If you want to recommend a book, leave me a comment below. I'd love to check out more Christian dystopia stories, but also Christian romance. And then my very favorite stories are if there's some sort of deconstruction or doubt. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.